Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Greiner, your host for today's Swine podcast. And with me today, I have Dr. John Carr, who's with Carr Consulting and 𝗵𝗵𝘁 Animal Health. How are you doing today, Dr. Carr?
No, very well indeed. Very well.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you on the podcast today. I know we were visiting here a little bit ahead of time and reflecting on some fun stories. And before we really jump into our conversation today, there was probably some people in our audience who aren't familiar with you, and maybe have you give just a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to where you're at today.
Okay, well, I'm a veterinarian, and I love pigs. I have no issue with saying that. I started working with pigs when I was 11, and I would argue, almost everything I've learned, I probably learned before I was 18. I can't necessarily say that vet school taught me an awful lot about pigs. They taught me an awful lot about animals, but that even in the 70s and 80s, the pigs were still had already started to be a bit of a background species, and that has been a bit of a challenge through my professional life. But no, so I started working with pigs when I was about 11. I used to go along and collect the eggs at the local farm and tail dock and teeth clip the piglets and move the piglets around. And by the time you get to about 14, you're now given the farm at the weekend to feed the pigs and look after them. But that's where my love of pigs came from. And in some respects, it actually reflects my professional life. I'm not the son of a pig farmer. So I grew up working as a stock person, but it actually makes a change because when I work with my clients and farms, I'm always conscious of the people working on the farm. And so one of the things I try to do very much is reduce the amount of work they've got to do. Sometimes it's very easy being a veterinarian to say, oh, we'll vaccinate against coronavirus and then walk away. And you've just given some guy 5,000 injections to do 4 times a year to adult sows who don't necessarily appreciate it. And I was that guy you gave that to. So I tend to be a little bit like, do I really, really, really have to do this? Is there an alternative way? Before I manage to get my hand bitten off by one of these beautiful animals, but they do have large mouths and big teeth.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you bring up a very relevant point. You certainly, labor has been in the forefront of everybody's mind, not just in agriculture, but more recently, of course, around the world and in just any market that we're looking at, really. And I think that's really important what you say. I always went through that same philosophy. If I'm going to ask my employees to do it, I need to be able to get in there and do it with them to make sure that I'm not asking more of them. But I think that's the real concern that we see today is this, what's the future of ag, in particular, what's the future of swine production, and how do we manage through the labor shortage? And so let's just start there. Where do you see the future of swine production 10 or even 20 years out from now?
Well, I can go back a bit into my own history, and a very influential veterinarian, 𝗪𝗵𝘁, and I was a snotty-nosed little 16-year-old. And 𝗪𝗵𝘁 is like a god in the pig industry, but I didn't know. And my other godfather, as such, is a guy called 𝗪𝗵𝘁. And these two professional veterinarians, one is American, the other guy is English, and they took me under their wing. And so I'm this little 16-year-old who's just seeing practice. And I do remember 𝗪𝗵𝘁 said something, and I can't remember exactly what it was, and I just said, "You're wrong." And the look on his face, he said, "And you are?" And I'm like, oh, and Mike was like, "Oh, he's this student who seems to like pigs." But ever since then, we got on extremely well. Now, so this is maybe 30 years ago, sadly. And so Al said to me a long time ago, because I was fascinated with people and stockmanship and everything else. And he said, you will come to a time, John, when you cannot afford people. And so we're looking at the 80s, and I'm like, no, I'm designing all these systems, to make people react to pigs and everything else, and good behavior responses, and because I still think that's all very important. And then sadly, as I've grown up, I understand what Al is now saying to me. This is some 30 years ago, that I'm going to just run out of people. And so I'm actually in Asia at the moment, and one of what the Asians do is they don't really see Saturday and Sunday, but they're beginning to. So last week I spent my week in Korea, and I said to the Koreans years ago that they're going to have to think about their system so that Saturdays and Sundays become important. So just very, very basic stuff like Saturdays and Sundays. You know, one of the reasons I'm a pig veterinarian is that fundamentally I used to do cows, and I just don't like the morning. And 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, having to get up and carve a cow is fantastic, but it can get very tiring. Pigs do 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and we need to consider the pig, and we need to consider the staff inside the buildings. And I actually amuse myself a little bit, because I reckon that at about 5 o'clock, the pigs are all sitting there waiting, and then the staff leave, and they go, "Oh, Doris, at last, those 2-legged ones have gone. You know, what are we going to do? What do we want to watch tonight? You know, what are we going to eat? How's your kids doing?" You know, and I think sometimes the pigs have a big sigh of relief, like, "Oh, they've gone. At last, they've gone. They're going to stop doing their injections and all their fapping around." And there is a little bit of a problem here, because I'm also convinced that pigs actually do more work at night. Where as human beings, we tend to work during the day, but most mammals actually are twilight animals. So for instance, outdoors, mating is finished at 5 o'clock in the morning. And yet, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you want to get a sow pregnant. I mean, and the boar's like, "What now? You must be joking. Don't even realize it's hot. Come back at 3 in the morning." And so sometimes when you consider farming, we're forcing these animals to farm according to our schedule, and where really we need to be farming to theirs. But kind of going back to where you were thinking of in terms of people, we need to design our farms so it's not labor intensive. I see no reason why nowadays, I have to be lugging food on my shoulder to sows, including lactating sows. Now, they have to be fed individually, but that doesn't mean I can't control the machine. But human beings are not really designed to be lugging tons of food around. What I want is professionals working on my farms. I don't need laborers. A pig farm is a very expensive piece of equipment. I mean, millions of dollars. And, I need somebody who's trained to be able to do it. Now, in the States, we're looking at one stock person for, say, 300 sows. If you go to parts of Asia, we're still down at 25, one person for 25. So, I mean, I joke with my clients, because I was on a 3,000 sow farm in Korea, and 50 people. And they sort of said to me, "How many people would you have, John?" And I said, 7. I'll give you 10. And you can look at everybody. And he said, "Guys, you've got African swine fever. And every person is a potential risk. And if I remove 30 people from the farm, then I've reduced the risk of African swine fever." But they're still struggling with this concept but that same farm 5 years ago had about 70 people on it. So they've already halved, and they're going to have to half and more again in the next 5 to 10 years. And in many respects, they already have all the infrastructure there. They have the automatic feedings. They have particularly automatic farrowing feedings. They have because the Koreans are fantastic with electronics. So they're monitoring everything. They've got cameras watching how the pigs are eating, and the machines are weighing the food. And I'm like, well, what are people doing? So what I need, and I think from the pig welfare point of view, pet well-being point of view, We need highly qualified professional staff. And I said to the boss, I said, it's very harsh. We half the number of staff and you double the wages of everybody on the farm. So the company doesn't lose out, but you make it so that the staff who remain are well paid, well motivated, will go on courses, will work. And it is sad. I mean, they will work after 5, but that when I mean work, that because they'll read journals, they may be at home playing with the kids, but that doesn't mean that they're not watching a podcast. They're not listening to Swine. They're not, reading the latest magazine while they're watching with their feet up, playing with the kids. I still class that as family life, but I also class it as work. I mean, there's time you physically work, and then there's time when you have to mentally work as well. I love the pigs behind you, actually. I've just noticed them.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you have your own little pig farm in the background.
Yes, we have quite a collection of pigs in our house, like most veterinarians and people involved in swine, right?
Yeah. If we're going to enhance animal welfare and animal production, then we need to really only employ people who truly love working with them. And and you and I doing something at 9 o'clock at night, reading a journal, is that work or is it enjoyment? I don't know. I mean, I'm very lucky because my students sort of say, how do you do this? And I mean, I have a hobby and I get paid for it. And I've never quite understood why I get paid, but it's fantastic. I have this hobby which I've done since I was 11, and I actually make a living out of doing it. So I've almost never worked a day in my life. It's
That's great.
Well, the first thing is actually, I don't necessarily need the guys to work. So one of the things that I do simply, I mean, the traditional farm that grandfather worked on, 250 sows, big farm. So for instance, we wean on a Thursday. We wean on a Thursday because they breed on Tuesday. Well, Granddad bred on Tuesday because he was doing natural mating. Each sow would take 15 minutes. And I can remember as a boy, so a 14, 15-year-old, my job was to look after the boars and assist the mating. And actually, the boss was very interesting. When we had a new boar come on to the farm, the staff used to have to line up on the roadway, and we'd have to bow to him.
Oh.
and this boar would then walk up the path. And Mr. Pexton was very clear. He is the boss. He is the emperor on this farm, and you lads will treat him with absolute respect. And literally, that's what he did. The boar would unload, and then the boar would walk onto the farm, and the staff would have to. I always think it's very weird, but when I look back, I'm like, Mr. Pexton recognizes that he is what matters. He is the future genetics. Now it comes in a bottle, but that's fundamentally so. On a Tuesday, we would breed 15 minutes a sow. Well, 250 sow unit, that's 12. A 2,500 sow unit, that's 120. That's a lot of minutes in a day. So now we've gone to AI. Well, actually, I can now breed at 100 an hour to people. So that's an hour's work, which would have taken me all day. But I still wean on a Thursday because of Tuesday has to be a primary day. Well, actually, if you then think about what Granddad did and then rethink it, what matters today is food conversion. We've got to compete against poultry. So what matters today really is the weaner. We've got to get the weaner off to a great start. We've got to get that food into the pigs. We've got to get the pigs going. When you wean on a Thursday, you wean on a Friday. You're weaning on Thursday, but so then on Friday, the piglets are put into the nursery. But everybody wants to go home. You've got Saturday and Sunday, nobody looks after them. You go to work on Monday and you have post-weaning diarrhea because nobody's fed the pigs probably haven't eaten, they probably haven't eaten well, then they gorge themselves, now you've got problems. So if you wean on a Monday, you've got all week to look after these baby pigs. And with these hyperprolific sows, we've got more pigs as well. If you wean on a Monday, you farrow on a Tuesday. Well, actually, when you got litters of 15 to 17, and Grandad only had litters of 10 and 11, so we've got half as many pigs again, with half as few staff. But if you wean on a Monday and you farrow on a Tuesday, you've got all week to look after these girls and their children. The downside, of course, is breeding. We're now breeding on Friday and Saturday, so it's the weekend. But if I can breed at 100 an hour, my breeding takes me 1 hour. So there was one fairly simple philosophical change where you can make a big change to the pigs, make a big change to the staff, because you are just changing the weaning day and forgetting what Grandad did, but looking at the new reality. Another area that I think the industry needs to focus on, I breed my sows once. So on the Friday and the Saturday, my sows get mated once. And the industry, I remember we moved the industry from 3 services to 2 services, and they were hesitant to do that. But now everybody accepts 2 services, and there's no point in 3. So my next leap is single serving with weaned sows. And people go, "You're crazy." I mean, but again, it's time, it's labor. I've got to be doing this. Now, I'm single serving once for carbon. What? Okay, I see the time saving. I can see you maybe saving some plastic in the catheter and everything else. But if I use the very, very, very best bores, I can reduce the FCR by 0.1. What 0.1 means is that for a 100-kilo pig, and in the States we're looking at 125, but we'll take 100 kilos because I can do the maths. 100-kilo pig, FCR of 2.7, you move it down to 2.6, that saves 10 kilos per head. So we did this calculation actually for Korea last week. So for every pig, I'm saving 10 kilos of food to produce that pig. And so if I have 100 pigs, I save a ton. If I have, 2,000 pigs, and so that's only 200 pigs a week. So I have 2,000 pigs. That's actually saving a truck. If a truck takes 20 tons, I'm saving a truck. And we did the calculation for Korea, and I could save something like 60,000 trucks a year for the Korean industry by just going to single serving. And I think the industry has to ask itself a question. I can save 60,000 truck drives, petrol, diesel, plus the fact that I can save all this extra food that I have to feed these animals by just adopting this simple one mating program in my weaned sows. And the industry, and to be honest, I'm like, well, what if the farrowing rate does fall? What if the litter size does fall? Does it really matter? I mean, economically, does it really matter? And the sad thing about it, the litter size actually goes up and the farrowing rate doesn't change. I suspect the litter size goes up because you're actually putting less contamination into the uterus. So you're using less and less semen, and therefore she has to clean herself out less. There's less immunological response, So there maybe is some science actually behind why this could be so. But I have a number of farms in Canada now where they'll mate 1.2 serves per sow on average. So we mate our gilts twice, we mate our lates twice, we mate our returns twice, but we single serve the sows. And on a 500 or 600 sow farm in Canada, they saved $58,000 worth of food last year with no impact on output and time, because you're only mating the animals once. And so, you go forward and say, well, where would we go in 5 or 6 years, 10 years? I think time. We've got to look at time, and I think we need to think about our number one competitors. Well, really fish, but our number one competitor is poultry. Fish are very interesting for both the chicken and the pig industry. But our number one competitor is poultry. She does I have to admit this quietly, she does a much better job at carbon. She understands nutrition much better than us. She has much tighter genetics than we have. She understands how to feed that chicken on every single day of its life. We are crude cavemen compared to the poultry industry. And forget cows, because they're not even developed mammals. But joking aside, I look at the poultry industry and I think, that's where we're going to be in 10 years. And I just think that things like single serving is one idea where we can change and try to compete a little bit against poultry. I mean, the hyperprolific sows, which the Danes have given us, is the biggest revolution in my entire life. I mean, weaning 10 was always a struggle, and then suddenly I'm expected to wean 12. And my Canadian guys are weaning 13 plus. And, not really breaking sweat. I mean, the sows are just amazing. I mean, we have such a beautiful athlete and she just gets on with it, and she's just totally fantastic, really. But yeah, so I think adopting some of the more poultry concepts, but we have to become real. Our job is to feed half the planet every day. Chickens feed and fish feed the other half. But I've got to do it in a way that the planet isn't suffering. And so I think we do have to take, I'm not sure about the word sustainability because it's just too politically correct, but I do believe we need to be looking at food and transport and carbon.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting concept because it's certainly not one I've heard, or at least put in that concept of breeding and limiting breeding and maximizing genetics, right? We knew with the evolution of PCAI that allowed us to shift the genetic population, improve feed conversion. But I think that's kind of that next step, right? What do we do after what's that next step with the technology? So I think that's really interesting. I'm going to tie in here real quick. Just, you mentioned it earlier, FAD. So let's talk about foreign animal disease and medicine, and how does that integrate into this futuristic sow farm, swine farm system? Because, that's certainly on everybody's mind today.
I mean, African swine fever is totally horrible. And for two reasons. One is that it's totally horrible for small farmers. The trouble with Africa, or the trouble, it's a mixed message, really. There is no reason for commercial pig farmers to be concerned about African swine fever. It's a very blunt statement. African swine fever moves 3 meters. So what, you're telling me that you can't defend your farm for 3 meters? Because that's all you have to do. You just have to make sure that your pigs do not meet any other pig, and that could be pig feces or whatever, for 3 meters. And you're fine. So, I mean, I farm farms in the Ukraine, have done for 15 years before African swine fever came, and since. We have no problem with African swine fever. We've had African swine fever 50 meters from our farms, no impact. It's all about biosecurity and perimeter fence, and it's about perimeter fence. The United States, sadly, talks a big story about biosecurity and then acts a very poor story. When I bought a house in Iowa, I was walking the edge of the farm, edge of my property as such, and my neighbor Jim came over with a beer, and he said, "You must be the Brit who bought the house next door." And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "I thought you would be." He said, "And you are doing what?" He says, I take it you're finding out the edge of your property." Because an Englishman's home is his castle is his home, you see. So you've got to know where the edge of the castle is. And I'm like, yeah. And he says, "We don't have fences here, you know." I said, "I had noticed." And he said, well, I enjoy hunting deer, and unfortunately the deer cross your land first, so I'm going to ask you not to put a fence up, and here is a beer. And I'm like, and I do bow hunting, and I said, well, if I can bow hunt on your land while chasing the deer that's crossing my land, and he looked at me and he said, okay, we'll have a beer together. And then from then on, we were great mates, because it was, but he was clearly concerned that as an Englishman, I was going to build a fence, and that could interfere with his hunting. But the Americans are not good at building fences. Americans, you cut the neighbor's lawn. I mean, you just keep going and cut the lawn, and then you don't worry too much about where. But the English, you see, there'll be like a blade of grass, would be the edge of the lawn. Unfortunately, the Americans need to learn a bit of a British attitude, I'm afraid, in African swine fever. We need perimeter fences around our farms. And that doesn't mean we turn our farms into a prison, because unfortunately people from outside think, oh, they put a fence up, there must be something to hide. Yeah, I'm trying to hide the pigs from the other pigs. We have wall-to-wall pigs in America. I mean, America, Canada. And perimeter fencing is unfortunately going to have to become a priority. So for commercial farms, I see no reason why we should be having a problem with African swine fever, as long as you keep the pigs off the farm. For smaller farms, like the British industry, 50% of it's outdoors. I just physically cannot see at the moment. I can't imagine how I can possibly stop wild pigs from going to see the pigs. And I mean, you've got to, depends on how crude it almost gets. I mean, you've got male wild boars, and you've got 2,000 sows. And the male wild boars know where all of the girls live. You've got like a girl dormitory, and you're a teenager. Well, you're not necessarily that interested in the sports club. I mean, but you do know where all the girls live. And it's a little crude, but our pigs will come to the farm for two reasons. One is sex, and the other one is food. And if we leave food around, which is not uncommon underneath feed bins, they're going to come. And you've got to imagine that a 2,000 sow unit is quite attractive to an adult male boar. If not attractive, he knows where it is. So in some respects, we have to also think pig. Now, in Asia, but it's devastating for small farms. I mean, China has thousands of pig breeds, fantastic pig breeds, but they all live in 5. Some lady looks after them in a house. I mean, and we have to be careful we don't lose all of this genetic resource, because I don't know what genetics I'm going to need tomorrow. But given the fact that the conversation's about tomorrow, I'm going to suggest that we should be building up. I think we need multi-story pig farms. Pigs live in buildings. They don't live. I mean, okay, the British pig industry is 50% outdoors. Okay, very nice. Looks nice. Well, I'm not sure. Sometimes it's a bit of a mess, to be honest. But you look at the average pig farm. Pigs have a thermal neutral zone and everything else. We provide them. We put them in a building. Do these animals really need to know that the sun exists? I mean, their whole life revolves around the 4 walls and the ceiling. I don't know. I mean, I read a lot of science fiction books, and there's a lot of stories about humans on arcs, and the 4 generations on, the people don't realize they're actually on a spaceship, and one of the kids break out and realize that there's actually the sky doesn't exist. The sky is just metal. But from a pig point of view, they spend their entire life in this building. I mean, it's why would they worry about the sun coming up and down? I mean, people turn the lights on and off. But anyway, but what I'm saying is that we could design our pig buildings straight up. Now, I actually believe, from a moral point of view, this is good anyway, because then we can return farming back to wildlife. I mean, why build a pig farm flat when I can do the same thing straight up in an apartment type of complex, and then the wildlife can have the land that currently is being farmed. The other side to this coin is that the next 25 years is a major challenge for mankind. We're at 7.5 billion. We're going to go to at least 10 billion in the next 25 years. When I was a boy, there was 3 billion. So in my lifetime, in my so far lifetime, we've doubled. And by the time I get to maybe clocking off time, when they're culling out of my pen, yeah, an old farmer said that to me once, and I was like horrified. So he said, one of my mates had died, John. I'm like, oh, that's really sad. He says, well, it's just, they're culling out my pen now. And I looked at him, I'm like, what? What a horrible way to think about life. But anyway, as you get older, you start thinking, God, it's starting to cull out my pen. But we could have 3 times as many people on this planet as they had when I was a boy. I mean, so we've got 10 billion people, all who love pork. We're still feeding 40% of the people every single day. So I need nearly to double the pig industry on the planet, at least increase by 30%, 40%. How am I going to feed them? Where am I going to put them? I mean, all the people are going to eat all the corn and the soya. So insects, unfortunately, are going to have to be providing food, protein for our meat-producing animals. As a veterinarian, that actually gives us another opportunity, because we now need to consider the welfare and the well-being of these insects that we're going to be farming to feed our animals. But I do honeybees as well as an insect. Yeah. We can do another talk on honeybees. We're going to run out of land, because I need the land to allow tigers and things to roam, and also to grow crops. I need land for people. And so I'm proposing that our farms of tomorrow are multi-story farms. And then I'm going to go even more bizarre. They should be in the cities. We should be placing our farms in Shanghai, London, New York, because that's where the people are. And if you place them in New York, who's going to notice a 200,000 sow, 2,000 sow unit, 200,000 animals in a city of 25 million? And okay, I'm going to worry about the smell. Well, New York kind of has a smell anyway. You got diesel and everything else. And I think it'll just mix in with smell. But I can direct the ventilation system up into the air above human height. I have a fantastic slurry system already built for the 25 million people. I have a very good integrated road network. Most of my farms, I have to bring the food in and out anyway. I have the water supply, city water. And so my proposal is that you have the farrowing house on the top, then 2 gestation levels, then a nursery, a couple, and then finishing, then a slaughterhouse, and then a restaurant. And but they're in our cities, and then, of course, it's easy to get to work because people are living in the cities anyway. But that is everybody. Even pig farmers look at me and they go, "What are you smoking? You've been in Canada too much." But I mean, the Chinese are doing this, and I can remember so I come from East Yorkshire, worked on a very big farm, 250 sow unit. I got a very big opportunity to work in North Carolina, and I worked with Smithfield and Murray and Murphy Brown and Prestige, and I'd never been to a 2,000 sow unit. So I mean, I was then very privileged to now work in big units again, still always big units, and I'm now working with 10,000 sow units, so just units of 250. But so what North Carolina did to the European industry, I think the Chinese and the Asians are going to do to America. I think tomorrow's industry producing food for human beings, the Asians are going to capitalize on it first, I think. They don't have any land. The Koreans have no land anyway. They live in mountains. All the flat land they have is made for some of the best rice in the world. They haven't got the space to grow pigs. We already have 5-story pig buildings, but they look at me and they say, well, how big is yours? And I said, 40. And they go, oh my God. But anyway, the question you asked me was where we're going to go in 10 years, 15, 20 years. It's a fantastic opportunity. We're going to have to at least 30% increase our pig numbers. We already have increased our pig output by 20% using these hyperprolific sows. We do single serving. We increase our FCR 0.1, 0.15, 0.2, start competing against chickens. I think we need to revisit feed. We need to think about how do we convert not the best corn on the planet, the worst corn on the planet. We maybe should do more extrusion and everything else. I mean, one of the questions I have is, why did God put barley on this planet? He didn't put barley on this planet to feed pigs. He put barley on this planet to produce whiskey. I mean, it's whiskey that matters. But in order to produce whiskey, you have 95% of really poor quality barley, and somebody has to eat that. So the pigs are on the planet to eat the poor quality barley, so that the Scots and the Irish and the Japanese can make excellent whiskies. But it's just a different philosophy. Pigs are a bit like goats. They're garbage cans. They have a fantastic ability to convert garbage into high quality meat protein, and high quality meat protein for our kids, because it's our children that matter. We need to be giving these young children fantastic food, and pork is a fantastic food. How do we change our philosophy to feed 10 billion of us and still find room for lions and tigers, and to be nice to our pigs? And I see no problem with multi-story pig farming, where the pigs are provided with toys, good mental health attitudes, excellent veterinarians, excellent stock people who really care and love for them and love them. I think mankind and pigs have a great future together. We just have to think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really a unique perspective, and I think that's a really nice summary too of what you're thinking. And I enjoy the fact that you're kind of challenging us to certainly continue to think about what's next, right? We talk a lot and we think maybe more flat, and so I like the conversation of vertical and what does that really mean? And even the concept of putting pig farms within larger cities, there's a lot of logistics in there, I'm sure, that people are thinking about. But you are absolutely right in some levels, because that's where our people are. And if we need people to take care of animals, there's really some untapped potential within cities where people love animals, but they don't know how to tie that into a career without leaving their city. So I think that really brings some interesting concepts and things for our crew to think about. As we kind of wrap up our time here, John, really want to kind of get down to a couple of key questions that we like to ask all of our audience or all of our guest speakers. The first one comes down to what's your favorite swine resource book or website or whatever you may use?
My clients. I've learned everything I know about pigs from my clients. Going back to 𝗪𝗵𝘁. So I must have been in my 30s, and Al said to me, you would like to be a pig consultant? And I'm going, yeah. He said, okay, I'll tell you the secret, but you mustn't tell anybody else. And I'm like, whatever. So I said, go on. he said, walk the world and find an idea. I said, yeah. He says, and then the next year, you tell everybody about the idea you found last year and walk the world for another idea. And I said, what if I have an idea? And he just laughed at me. And he said, you're only entitled to one idea a lifetime. He said, so good luck on paying your mortgage. And in truth, I've actually done that. I mean, and he said, the biggest mistake you will do, John, is you'll find an idea and then you'll tell everybody. He says, you've got to keep it to yourself. He says, you tell everybody's last year idea, and then next year you tell everybody's last year's idea, but you must find a new idea. He says, the year that you walk around and don't find something new, he says, that's when you are going to have a problem as a consultant. You've got to have something new, and it's going to be your clients who are going to tell you. Don't think that you're going to think about it. So interesting. It was obviously Swine would be my number one resource go-to place. But no, I would argue my clients. My clients are listening. Well, that's another question. My clients are listening, reading, discussing. They're always coming up with, what if we do this? What if we do that? And then you laugh and you walk away, and then you're sitting in the car afterwards and you think, actually, that might be, maybe that's next year's idea. But there are things that I see. I mean, simple things. One of my Canadian clients, he used cling film, saran wrap, and he just put it across the top of the farrowing crate where the heat mat was. So where you have pigs by the door, pigs by a window, he just takes cheap saran wrap and he makes a lid for the first 10 days, and then he cuts it away. And I was giving a talk in Canada, and I was talking, and I showed him this picture. I remember this farmer stood up, and he stood up and he walked away. And I said, and I was like, oh, and I said, Harry, is there something I've said? He says, oh, no. He says, you've just solved a problem. He said, so why do I need to listen to the rest of it? He says, you're not going to give me have you got any more ideas? I'm like, no, that sounds good. He says, then why would I want to stay? He says, I'm going home. He says, you've fixed a problem that I have. And it was like, 10 o'clock in the morning, the meeting went all day. And he waved to his mates and he went home. And everybody in the room was like mouth open. But in truth, he was right. He'd come to the meeting not expecting anything. I actually blurted out some idea that he liked, and he then went home. But no, your clients teach you everything. Everything I've ever known, my clients have taught me.
That's a great one. How about something that's not pig related? Is there a book that you're enjoying today that you'd recommend to the listeners?
Frank Herbert's Dune. I really like the new film, I'll be honest. It's when I watched it for the first time, I'm like, because I read this book started reading this book when I was in my teens, and he kept writing more and more books, and we'd have to wait like 10 years before the next book comes out. And, so I actually went and downloaded the books again. I have a Kindle, and no, the whole genre is fantastic. But I've always loved science fiction. Hence farming in multi-story pig farms. I'm afraid it's more of a science fiction concept, but it maybe has a benefit. But when I switch off, I live in a fantasy land of maybe a lot of my small clients might think I live in a fantasy land of pig farming, but no, science fiction is and I love astronomy. So I've always loved. My grandmother loved astronomy. She told me the names of the stars, and I was just 5 or 6. I can remember looking up with her with my grandmother. It's one of my favorite memories, really, and it makes you realize just how small and insignificant you are, and our 7.5 billion, we're close on 10 billion. And it makes you realize that certainly at the moment we are confined to this blue marble. And if we kill the blue marble, we got nowhere else to go. So
That's right.
it's at the moment it's best to not kill the blue marble.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as we kind of wrap up, the last question we like to ask John is if you could think of somebody that you've defined as successful in your lifetime, and success can look however you want to define it, what would be a trait that stands out to you that you think has allowed them to be successful?
So the person I would thank for a lot of my career, well, there's many people. One could argue Mr. Paxton for giving me my first job working with pigs. Mike Muirhead was very influential. But again, my clients and my colleagues and everything else. But John has one, as you may have figured out a little bit, one problem: he cannot stop talking. So Mike, at some point, I was talking away, whatever, and he said, you do have a problem. And I'm like, do I? So I'll be 35 or something. He said, yes. He said, remember that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at him, and he says, Confucius says one should listen twice as much as one talks. He says, and the way you talk, you have to have another lifetime to be able to listen. I go, oh, yes, Mr. Muirhead. Because when I called him Mr., I was being serious. And he said, yeah, you do need to listen to people, John. He says, you're very good at talking to them, but you're not very good at listening to them. I'm like, so one trait that I'm not good at, which I still need to become better at, is I need to listen. But you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I am guilty of using my mouth more than my ears. That actually goes back to your first. If I don't listen, I'll miss the idea that I need for
That's
next
right.
year's survival. So
That's right.
maybe the two of them helped me all the way through my career.
I think you listen more than you think. If you're using your clients as your resource, you clearly are listening to what they're saying. So I think there's something there that you are in fact listening. Well, John, I see our time is up, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I know we could talk on for hours on some thoughts about what you've discussed and try to dive deeper. But I'm sure our audience, if they're interested, can reach out to you as well and pick your brain a little bit more. But again, we do want to thank you for your time, and just for the audience, again, this is Dr. John Carr with 𝗵𝗵 Animal Health. So, John, thank you so much, and we wish you a great rest of your day.
No, we will. It's getting sunny now, so I might go swimming in Singapore.
Perfect.
Imagine if, with a few key concepts, you could have the potential to create a massive positive impact by bringing from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for swine producers. Join us on this small group and go to the next level of swine nutrition on this 7-week-long elite online training in applied swine nutrition and feeding by myself and my world-class invited speakers. Additionally, you enjoy an exclusive community to exchange ideas. Go now to www.eliteswinenutritionist.com.